No, you can't see my face, but you should recognize my voice by this point. Everyone, welcome, man. We're going to go ahead and jump in today. But as always, want you to let us know where you're joining from. I'm in the chat. It's always fun to know who's in the room. I see my friend Rosemary. I'm cruising through her Milwaukee streets right now, so hopefully I get to see her face tomorrow. But thank you all for joining. Let us know where you're joining from in the chat, and we're going to get started today. As always, welcome in to another BDPA Tech and Career Talk. I am our Tech and Career Talk leader, Devin Jenkins. Serve as a commercial IT success manager for the U.S. and Canada region for GE Healthcare. Currently reside in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm also the founder and CEO of Share the Vibes LLC, connecting people through music and technology. I'm excited to have our friends from Vanguard with us today. Always a great conversation when Vanguard is in the room with us. So I'm so glad to continue this partnership. I think it's been about 3 years now, 3 or 4 years now that we've been collaborating. So glad to have you. As always, going to just do a quick intro around BDPA and the Tech Career Talks for those who may be unfamiliar, and then we'll turn the floor over to Vanguard and our esteemed guest today. But BDPA is Black Data Processing Associates. The organization was founded in 1975 as a means to provide technology education and development to our youth in the Black community, especially those in the middle and high school ages. It's also a forum for professional development, technological advancement for professionals in the IT industry as well. Our mantra is advancing careers from the classroom to the boardroom. The Tech and Career Talks take place on the second and fourth Friday of each month. We have a range of speakers, a range of topics. Some are very technical focused. Some are more on the soft skills and things that you can use to advance your careers. But we have something for everyone and everybody. So we're glad you're here. Tune in to all of our talks. You can find this talk after today, as well as all of our previous conversations on our YouTube channel, National BDPA. So go check those out, or you can go to bdpa.org. There's a Tech and Career Talks tab. They're all out there also. Last thing I'll say before I hop off today, make sure you go out to conference.bdpa.org and register for BDPA Con 24. We're just a few weeks away now. Super excited to go back to Atlanta at the Westin Peachtree Plaza, July 31st through August 3rd. So we'll be there for BDPA Con this year. A lot of focus around big data and AI. So this conversation definitely plays right into our conference theme this year with some of the things our speaker will be talking about today through a disability lens. So excited to see you in Atlanta in a few weeks and excited for today's conversation. So Akil, Amara, I'll turn the floor over to you all to walk us through today's experience.
Fantastic. Good morning, everyone. And thank you again for Devin, BDPA, for allowing us to facilitate another conversation with you all. Yes, it's been close to 3 years, and everyone has been interesting. We're very appreciative of the opportunity and the platform, and also the partnership. So thank you, BDPA. Today, you guys, we are super excited to kind of get into some we have a guest that we've had before, but we coming from a different angle today and coming with some new information. Excited to celebrate Disability Month. We're excited to celebrate the 34th anniversary of the ADA, and there's nobody better to help us navigate this conversation than our guest today, Dr. Yvette Pegues. Some of you have met Dr. Yvette Pegues at BDPA Con a couple years ago, but if you haven't, you can definitely find her on YouTube. You can find her on all social platforms. You can find her at on TED Talks. So she is amazing. So we're gonna have a good time this morning. My name is Akil Bektimba, for those of you who don't know, and I'm the CEO of Vanguard Consulting Group. We are a consulting firm that has been primarily focused in the workforce development space, apprenticeship space, training space, professional development space. But our 3 tenets are in public health, education, and workforce development. And so we are excited about what we're doing and who we're doing it with. I'm going to pass the mic over to my colleague before we introduce Dr. Pegues again, and let Amara introduce herself and kind of get us started. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Akil, for the introduction. My name is Amara Tennessee. I serve as Director of Programs with Vanguard Consulting Group, LLC. And it is definitely a full circle moment to be coming up on another BDPA conference, to be sitting here during a BDPA Tech and Career Talk with Dr. Pegues, because this is how we met. Through the conference is how we all became connected. And since then, it's been a beautiful partnership and relationship that we've been able to form and grow and nurture. And I think today's topic is as relevant as it's ever been. I think celebrating Disability Pride Month, we're right in the middle of it. We've got, 14 days, 2 weeks until the 34th anniversary of the ADA, which is really exciting. And I think you all are in for an incredibly special conversation with our guests. So without further ado, I would love to introduce Dr. Yvette Pegues.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning. So a little bit of housekeeping before we dive into our conversation. We'll have the opportunity throughout the Tech Talk to pose any questions to our guests. So I will be in the chat fielding all of the questions. So we're going to make sure to utilize that. But to get started, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey, and kind of what brought you here?
Absolutely. So for those of you who don't know or haven't seen any of my talks, it was not a straight line. I'm excited to be born in South Florida and having my first job at IBM, which does stand for I've been moved, because International Business Machines has been long known to move us around. So as a young college graduate, I was excited to graduate with an engineering degree and to be recruited by IBM and move to Atlanta. Things were great until they weren't. Unfortunately, I did suffer with some pain and paralysis, which took me to the emergency room, after which I was told that I was actually born with a cognitive disability, where my brainstem was too long at birth, and over time it dropped into my spinal column. So this visit didn't end like we expected. I was told I needed to have brain surgery. And so in the process of that surgery, my spinal cord was injured, and it took me about 2 years after the injury to recover. I could not walk, talk, or work. I am now a full-time wheelchair user, still an engineer, diversity champion, keynote speaker, mother, and wife of 2 incredible boys, Isaiah and Elijah.
Awesome. What a beautiful intro and a very compelling story that I think many people, when we see wheelchair users or people with some of those visible disabilities, you never know kind of what led to those events. But thank you so much for sharing that. And you wear quite a few hats, like you said, an engineer, you're a champion for diversity, you're a keynote speaker, and of course, most importantly, a mother and a wife to a beautiful family. So we're coming up on the 34th anniversary of the ADA. And so can you tell our audience a little bit about some of the progress that's been seen in accessibility and inclusion, and what are you personally most proud of in that progress?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question to kind of kick this off. For many who are not aware, the Americans with Disabilities Act was signed by the first Bush in 1990, July 26, making this year the 34th anniversary. So, I mean, I can say there's been a lot of progress, because, prior to the ADA, there's these different models of disability. If I have a moment, I can just run through them really quickly. When you think 50 years ago, the initial model of disability was charity, right? So the expectation was that if you were disabled, the only way to sustain your life is through charity. For those of you, I guess, over 40 or 50, Jerry Lewis had like telethons where he would raise money on TV to help specific, children with disabilities. So that was a model that was very common. And then, after that, the medical model became very common. It was a way to sustain the life of individuals with disabilities. So without medical intervention, we were considered broken. And so in 1990, which is why this is so landmark, there's this social model. Like, wait a minute, we're not the one that's broken. You know, our society and infrastructure is broken. That's why we don't leave the house. That's why you don't see much of us. And this is important because depending on the model of disability that you became first familiar with, that's probably where you are today. Unless something like BDPA and today's conference gives you kind of an insight through the lens of someone with a disability who was not always living in a disabled world.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing about that. And I think those models and how we perceive and interact with people with disabilities really sets the tone and stage. So I'm very happy that we're in a position and place where we can share a lot more of the personal journey and what activism and advocacy can look like.
So you laid a really great groundwork for how it's been prior to today and how it came. I learned something new every time we talked, because I didn't know that there were, I didn't even realize that there were models, although I am over 50, and so I do remember and the telethons, money and trying to raise money and that kind of thing. But I think the awareness that you just talked to on the social model is very important. What would you say the current state of accessibility is in the United States? And are we even close to meeting the goals envisioned by the ADA?
So that circles back to the last question, right?
Yeah.
So the progress and then the inclusion. So let's just circle back and make sure we understand what the actual goals were, right? The actual goal is to eliminate discrimination against individuals with disabilities, equal access and opportunities in employment, public services, transportation, school, telecommunications, and just so many different aspects of society, basically just equality, right? So to answer your question, Akil, I would say no. Right. So while significant progress has been made in accessibility, there are huge gaps, like in digital access, public transportation, inclusive and universal design, not just living, but also universal design in learning.
Right. And so that obviously brings in the policymakers and those that are in position, the advocates. How can they work together better, in your perspective? How can they work together better to ensure that new technologies, because obviously everything is technology related or based these days, from the equipment that you use to access to all the things we talk about. How can they work together better to ensure that new technologies are designed with accessibility in mind from the onset, as opposed to as a corrective measure or a kind of fix or band-aid to what's already happening?
No, I love that question, and I get asked that question with the same words and without them. So let me first communicate to this audience that people with disabilities are 61 million Americans. 1 in every 4 individuals have a visible and an invisible disability. So with that said, we are the third largest market, right? So if we are the largest people group, right, and we are the third largest market, that just really equates to being the greatest users and innovators of technology. So with that said, it just seems obvious to me, of course, policymakers and advocates need to collaborate, right, to implement inclusive design standards, right, partner with disability communities to ensure like accessibility is legal, it's regulatory, and it's enforced. Because even though the Americans with Disabilities Act is a law, it's not very well enforced. We'll just put it that way. But it definitely needs to be a requirement in tech development to promote innovation and, benefits everyone. What we do for one, we do for all. So we're not just isolating people with disabilities or excluding those who are considered to be neurotypical. It actually and necessarily includes everyone.
Right. And you shared how you got, from growing up in South Florida and graduating school and getting recruited and moving to Atlanta, and then to where you are now. What would you say was kind of, or a pivotal moment? I know you've had many, but what was a kind of a pivotal moment that you would share with us in your journey as an advocate?
Mhm.
You taught us a lot about Judy Human and all those, and the people that were your mentors. But what was kind of a pivotal moment that you were as an activist that significantly shaped how you advocate today?
So this is going to sound super simple, but in one word, storytelling. So throughout my journey, I had to leave the house, right? Because I had two small children and I wanted to be the yes that they can use throughout their life. So just leaving the house and being able to tell my story, much like the opportunity you've given me today. So from my TEDx and sharing parts of my journey on major stages and conferences, BDPA included, I could not have imagined how much it would have impacted the attendees and their experiences, and reinforcing the power of visibility and transparency and my actual everyday lived experience. It wasn't a hard story to tell, especially after I got over the major changes in my life. But I believe that I got more from people talking with me afterwards, those in those different models of disability who had no reason to pivot, right, until after they heard my story. And pairing that with my expertise, my subject matter expertise, my engineering expertise, really did speak with and touch everyone in the room. The way the audience responded, the culture shifts that happen in corporate spaces with my consulting clients, it definitely fueled my dedication to promoting accessibility, workplace transformation, and fueling, my dedication to promoting accessibility, workplace transformation, and inclusion. But to be perfectly honest and, very basic, I didn't just become disabled. I still live with chronic pain. So I'm reminded daily how important it is for others to be included. I serve my community on a regular basis. So it's not a one and done. It's something that I experience every day, although painful, very much, a reminder that there's still work to do.
Yeah, and your energy, and I'm amazed. I get guilty sometimes myself when I'm complaining about things, knowing you so well, and kind of the conversations and seeing how you move. When we met, and Amara mentioned it earlier, we met at the conference. The thing that drew me, I didn't know that you guys had already connected. That people don't know this story, but I didn't know you guys had already spent time and connected. But I was over on a call and got off a call, and I was like, Amara, who is this woman? I have to meet her. There was a huge crowd around you, and got to fight through the crowd to get to you and finally meet you. But it was, just your energy. You talk about how you relate your story, and there's people who, I was in a meeting with another client doing a whole different kind of line of work, and they were talking about DEI and access and accessibility and these things for a gym. And it was interesting because I interjected and said something to they were talking about diversity. And I interjected and said, well, what about diversity for this set of people? And I spewed off some of your stats about 64 million people and 1 in 4 and all these things that you had taught. And so your words are working through, through the rest of us as well. I want to jump into, getting everybody to hear a little bit about your invisible disability group. And so can you tell us a little bit about the organization and some of the things that you have going on there?
Absolutely. So your Invisible Disability Group was created with that exact title because I don't just have physical, visible disabilities, but also invisible disabilities. And for the 85% of people with disabilities who have to explain themselves, right? So the invisible disabilities are so hard to communicate. My new motto is, when people show you who they are, and tell you
Yeah.
how they hurt, believe them. And I think we're challenged so much in the workplace. So, your invisible disability was created initially just as a bridge, right? So I know that it was hard for me to get services. And I spent 80% of my time hearing the word no. So our goal was not to create something new, but to bridge, a path for newly disabled and diagnosed persons to resources that they needed, because it's all specific. I tell everyone all the time, once you've met someone with a disability, you've met one person with a disability, because we're all different, right? So our organization was built to empower, equip, educate, and include people with disabilities. That was our initial mission. But we're proud as an organization to have empowered other organizations, right? Fortune 100, Fortune 1000s, and communities, right? So it's not just a one-to-one, call me, tell you what you need, tell me what you need, and I'll change your 80% no rate to more of an 80% yes rate. So when you pick up the phone, you're not discouraged by hearing all the no's because you haven't called the right organizations. And I have personal, relationships with them. But I know our work has improved accessibility. It's raised awareness and, created more equitable environments where, individuals with disabilities and their families can thrive and can thrive and contribute meaningfully.
That's great. I want to jump in real quick. We have a couple comments and I think they're fitting. A couple comments here in the chat box. Sammy Nixon Jr., thank you for joining us. Says first he says how we have evolved. If we have, or how have we evolved? We have in explaining and addressing disabilities for children in our schools across the nation. So the question, let me say it again. How have we evolved? If we have in explaining and addressing disabilities for children in our schools across the nation is the question. And he says, and what, in your opinion, do we have to do better with this arena? So explain disability or with children is the question. How do you think we are doing with that, and how can we do better, and what do we need to do better?
Thank you for your question. I can tell you on this journey, I am super discouraged. I have been told by individuals who very clearly fit into some of the earlier models that disability doesn't matter. And I can tell you that I'm encouraged by Gen Z. I'm encouraged by Gen Next, because they're not having it, right? They want to know why. They're more inclusive. They understand differences better. And so I can say we have to come from a place of understanding what is disability, right? Participating in talks like this. Once there's, an understanding, then we can promote allyship. Because if you think about it, right, there's accident, there's injury, there's illnesses, and there's aging. So this is one of the only communities where you can pop into it and maybe even out of it if it's a temporary injury, more than any other, right? So I think what we need to do, and what has been done, I'm proud to say, shortly after my disability, my kids were being bullied. I'm rolling around in 90-pound Walmart wheelchair, very heavy, very clunky. I had neck braces on, chest braces on, and I'm still trying to be in the PTA, trying to be an encouragement to my kids, and they got bullied. What they did, though, is they turned bullying into a book. So what we did the first couple years of my injury, we went around to different schools, and they were able to present their book by kids for kids. So I think our kids need to have permission to see me in the grocery store and ask me questions like, what's wrong with you? Of course, that makes the parents turn blue, right? They feel like the child is so disrespectful. And I can tell you, not everyone in the community is open to having, that kind of questioning in a public space. I am. And it's okay to ask, hey, my kid's staring at you. I don't really know what to tell them. Is it okay if they ask you a question? Whatever that looks like, we need to get into schools. We need to get into the workplace. We need to get into places where children live and allow them to ask healthy questions. Because again, these numbers, the 61 million number, does not include COVID. So it's very likely that we are 2 to 3 steps away from someone with a disability. So I would say, as far as children are concerned, to have very transparent conversations with them, read books, give them access to information that is definitely age appropriate, but requiring your school to include it in the conversation, and having teachers, roll up in wheelchairs, which I've done at every one of my children's school, to sub, to pick them up, to be in PTA, just to be present. We're very visual, and especially children. I hope that answered your question.
No, that's perfect. And I think that that also fits very well how you describe the invisible disability, because kids need to know that there are people that it's not just the person that you see that's blind, or the person that you see that's in a wheelchair. That is a whole section of the community and the population that have disabilities that are not necessarily visible. And for them to know that, and for them to get that as kids,
Yes,
is going to inform their whole, as they become adults, right? As becoming teenagers, and they may become advocates. So I think that's a great question, Samuel Nixon. Thank you for that. And I will ask the second one you have real quick, and before we move on to the next question that we have prepared. But the next one was, and you've kind of touched on some of it, but it says, what would you say are the top 3 most misconceptions about people with disabilities, and what do you think these why do you think these misconceptions continue to be prevalent?
so I can start with the second part. Go ahead.
Top 3, and why are they?
Okay.
No, go ahead, you got it.
All righty. So I can answer the second part of that, and just circle back to the models of disability, right? And exposure. So I can say specifically that I thought my disability would break my children. I literally said, God, break me, just please don't break my children. What it's done, it's created emotional intelligence in 2 little human beings that I don't think exists in the world. I mean, like, in their little bodies, they are so careful and caring about people with disabilities. So I would say understanding the models of disabilities and not understanding them is probably the reason why. So when we think about top 3 is that we have nothing to offer. We don't have skills. We are, again, charity models. We are, to be honest, not worth living. And I can say the second one is because maybe we have a visible disability or a language barrier, or maybe, use a device to communicate or walk and talk and get around in the world, that we are inherently illiterate or dumb and stupid, to be perfectly honest. I think the third one might be more around abilities. Like, we can't do anything outside of our wheelchairs, and hopefully we get a chance to talk about that, because I'm involved in 21 different adaptive sports. So I can assure you, I can assure you that I'm not wheelchair bound or handicapped in some of the language that have been used in the past to describe someone with a disability. So I think those are the really big ones. But there's just so many more. And there's the fear factor, right? Kind of like I mentioned, people are afraid to have those conversations and talk to people with disabilities, and that's okay. That's okay. And that fear is fair, because my face doesn't always represent someone who's happy-go-lucky, right? My face may be scrunched a little bit. Maybe I'm lost. Maybe I'm uncomfortable. Maybe, my sensory triggers have been triggered, or maybe I'm just in pain. So I am very intentional about what my face looks like, so that I can be approachable and have these conversations. So that might be a little bit more than 3, but they're all related.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I think that those are all so important, because it's about awareness, right? And it's about and explaining, to us folks who don't know what that feels like, don't know what that experience is, to really know what it is, and then to add that into our consciousness as we move through the world. I know ever since meeting you, I'm a different person. So it's really been I like to call myself an ally at this point, because I really do feel that we push this agenda. Before we get into the fun stuff, I'm gonna pass the mic to Amara, where you guys can talk about the technology and adaptive sports and all the stuff that I know people want to hear. I just want to point out one thing about and have you tell us a little bit about the 2 scholarships that you have that I just read a great press release about a couple of days ago. So can you tell us a little bit about that before we move on to the next thing?
I would love to, Akil. Thank you for asking. Both of them tell my story as an engineer and a disabled student. So after the 2 years of recovering from not being able to walk, talk, and work, I had the audacity to want to go back to school to complete my education. That was because both my parents were considered illiterate. I still believe they're geniuses. They did not have access to school. Being foreign, it was not as available as it is here in the United States. So going back to school for me was so difficult because I went from being a model student to not being able to synthesize information. And I didn't realize that my IQ had dropped so low and that information was not received or even taught in the way that I understood. So I spent a lot of time completing my doctoral program. It took me 5 years to finish a 3-year program. And I just felt like these resources need to be available to disabled students. My father-in-law was a science teacher, and under the sciences fall STEM, which I love very much. And so we have two separate scholarships that are available, and they're publicly distributed through bowl.org, which is used in most universities. So you can go to bowl.org, type in either my name or type in Dream Right Hope University, which is our nonprofit that sponsors those scholarships, to find them and share them and make sure that aspiring professionals to promote innovation and remove the financial barriers and encouraging diverse talent in critical areas of study so the next generation can be educated and supported financially in this fight for inclusion.
I love it. I love
Really,
it.
thank you so much for sharing. I put those links in the chat. So for those of you who are interested, definitely check out the organization and everything that Dream Right Hope does and the scholarship funds. If you have a young person who's has a disability or is a caretaker, I think it's open to a few different people, but definitely read through the qualifications, and we all love free money. So if you're looking to continue your education and you meet the requirements to apply, definitely take advantage of that opportunity.
There's also opportunities to contribute, right? So it's also an open fund. So if you yourself may not have anyone who qualifies, you are definitely encouraged to make 501(c)(3) tax-free donations to students you may not have met and may not ever have a chance to thank you. So I'll thank you in advance on their behalf.
There you go.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that. I have to say, so much of what you say tends to stick out in my mind. I feel like I have conversations that we have that replay later, and you kind of bring up different points. But when you said that when people show you who they are and tell you they're hurt, believe them. I have to tell you that that has left like a very profound just a profound impact on me. I think so often when we talk about disability and people that have both visible and invisible disabilities, it's so quick to kind of loop or lump people together.
Yeah.
As, you know, I know one person in a wheelchair, therefore I know the story of everybody in a wheelchair. And it's so not true, because everybody with a disability is so incredibly different and so unique. And I think you've been able to share a lot about how far we've come, but also that there's a lot of work that still needs to be done in living in and operating in this truly equitable and inclusive space. And I know that for you, technology has made a really big difference in how you're able to move throughout the world, how you're able to interact and see people, but also how you're seen by people. I think we've had several, encounters and instances. When I met Yvette for the first time, she was at eye level with me, and I'm 5'9". And I think I had shoes on that day, so I was probably closer to like 5'11", 12, or 6 foot maybe.
Yeah.
And Yvette and I were eye to eye, which if you've, maybe only met someone in a very traditional wheelchair, then you've probably not had that interaction. And we know that through human dynamics, when we're talking to someone, if you're looking down at them, even with the most kind words that could come out of your mouth, there's still kind of a physical perception from the outside that you're literally looking down on them as you're speaking. And so being able to interact and talk with Yvette eye to eye as our first interaction, I know she's in a chair, but it almost takes away some of the stigma that people might have on those first, encounters that made that first interaction between two of us really, really special. So I hold that very dear. And I would love for you to share, Yvette, a little bit about how technology has impacted people who are living with disabilities in the recent years. We're living in a very tech-forward world right now. So if you could share a little bit about that and a little bit about some of the promising developments you've seen.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question because, I think what I hear you talking about, which is so important, and this word might have been used in your presence, and you may or not have been comfortable with what was being talked about, but neurodiversity, right? Neuroinclusion. I think probably again back to the 85% of most disabilities are neurological. They speak to your nervous system, your brain, how your body reacts to different things. They're cellular. And so when we think about autism or ADHD, right, we need to embrace it and tap into the unique talents, right? So it's not like you're doing anyone a favor as much as you're allowing what they're able to do to precede what they may not be able to do. And I don't know, I think we're superheroes because individuals with disabilities have to get from point A to point B in a very special, creative, and innovative way. And why not foster that innovation kind of like in your workplace or at your school? But, I just really feel that it's a gift to the world. So when I think of new inclusive practices, I'm thinking about, believe it or not, especially when we're talking about, the workplace, it's disclosure, but how do we feel psychologically safe, right? We're back to what you were saying, right? When I tell you who and how I am, believe me. And that doesn't just apply to disability, right? That applies to LGBTQ plus communities. It applies to the ageism that we're experiencing in the workplace. There's just so many areas where that fits. So having sensory friendly environments and training programs like what we're doing today on neurodiversity for staff to promote understanding, of course, and to accommodate everyone's diverse needs, and enhancing productivity and job satisfaction. And, we also have neurodivergent, employers. So disclosure is huge. And I think you talked a little bit about technology impact. So, I want to make sure I answer your questions, but not before you ask them.
No problem. And I think disclosure is really unique. And you and I had a really interesting conversation earlier in the week about the way that people self-identify and disclose things about their disabilities. And we talked about on LinkedIn, you have a little bit of a change in your pronouns. You've added something to the end. So would you like to tell the group about what that change was, maybe what motivated it, and how you feel represented moving forward?
Absolutely. So most people say she, her, he, him, them, they. My, LinkedIn shows she, her, disabled. And I'm okay disclosing at the onset that I am disabled. It is very exciting for people to reach out, specifically wanting to talk about that third piece, right? I've even had people within the disability community say, well, why would you put that down as an identity? Well, because it is. It's hard to miss. And it's something I'm proud of, and I like to disclose up front. For employers, disclosure is so important because there's government opportunities for our heroes and individuals with disabilities to not just be brought into the workplace, but also for federal funding to make sure that their accommodations are covered. So it's a benefit to companies that are receiving federal funding to have employees within their organization to disclose. So if you are on LinkedIn and you're looking for a job and you have disabled there, it's not a matter of inequality, right? It's not a matter of preference. It's a matter of honesty, right? And not having to have those conversations that are sometimes uncomfortable when you have to talk about your disposition.
Absolutely. And we started our conversation a little bit around technology, and I'd love to get back to technology and see how has it impacted the lives of people with disabilities recently, and then what are some of the promising developments you've seen?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, we're the #1 users of tech. It's profoundly enhanced our lives, and it's because we needed to get from point A to point B. So not only are the greatest users of technology, but we are the greatest innovators of technology, like assistive devices, communication apps, and accessible digital platforms, AI-driven accessibility features, smart home technologies, autonomous and assisted driving, wearable devices, all of which, empower independence and inclusion, but not just for us. Smartphones, AI, curb cuts, even automated driving, all those things were created for a population that could not access those tools otherwise. So we're all walking into doors that open automatically and not having to touch them, especially during COVID, because an individual like myself had to have one hand on her power chair controller or two hands on her wheels to get into a door. So we're all experiencing innovation within technology. So it's not just a consideration. It is one of those mantras that we sing always. It's nothing about us without us. So when creating technology, include the people that you're serving. This isn't just people with disabilities, it's people with color, it's women. When we talk about medicine and how it was created, any area where you feel you have a lens through which an organization, society, or a specific innovation affects you directly, you should be included in that innovation. So I mean, I can talk about so many of it. There's no way I could do adapted sports without having innovation, and a lot of it is technologically driven.
Absolutely.
It's also very interesting when you've taught us that a lot of those innovations, technology and otherwise, or accommodations, are actually used almost as much or more by people without disabilities than
Yeah.
than they are for who they were meant for.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I have to jockey when crossing the street for the curb cut, which is the indented area of the sidewalk where you don't have to step off an inch or two. I don't necessarily have a choice sometimes with a manual wheelchair, but I have to jockey for my place there because everybody, I think, just behaviorally is used to not having to step down, right? The path of least resistance is just who we are as humans, but we need to also stop and think, well, why is that there? There's a lady in a wheelchair behind me. Maybe I should let her go first. There's a woman in the bathroom who might need the larger stall, not just want it, not because it's, fun and exciting, or I have 3 pieces of luggage and 5 kids. It's not so much that it's exclusive, but to be cognizant that there is a reason for this, right? And the 20 stalls sometimes in the bathroom, I have to wait because there's only 2 where my wheelchair can fit, but it's a very popular space.
Yeah. And we talked about, you're talking about kind of the overall community, and we talk about intersectionality all the time, whether that be race, gender, socioeconomic status, and the whole list. How does that influence the experiences of people with disabilities, and what steps can we take to kind of address some of these overlapping challenges?
I love that you mentioned the intersectionality as a woman of color with a disability who's also Afro-Caribbean, right?
Right.
So I would say, especially as we cross some of those divides, that we take that into consideration, right? Because it shapes our experiences. And if we don't, it will compound discrimination, right? Based on those factors that you brought up, right? We need to prioritize inclusive policies, right? And include, like I said, the people within these communities to amplify, our marginalized voices, right? And fostering partnerships that promote equity across intersecting identities, because if we don't ensure fair access and resources and opportunities for all, then, we are closing our society, and, the talent pool of people with disabilities is already closed. We're now starting to open it up, but we're behind most countries because we're not using all of our talents, and we're not, removing biases that identify these communities, and they're not self-identification, right?
Right.
They're community and unknown classifications that have nothing to do with the community itself. That's why we need to be included, so we can tell you who we are, right? Show you who we are, and impress you with who we are, right? So a lot of times I have conversations with individuals with disabilities in hospitals, right? I work at the Children's Hospital, where, my book and the kids' book sit in the library, and, the parents are crying and wondering, well, my child will never be able to do anything ever because she or he has a disability, a spinal cord injury specifically. I'm like, well, hey, I have a PhD, I'm a wife, I'm a mom, I'm an educator. And yeah, by the way, I've also been in a pageant. So I try to cover
Right.
all bases, right, with all of my intersections, opportunities, and experiences to open up that door, and, a reason to ask for more information and to live beyond a life-changing event.
And I think I mean, with that last thing you just said about living and having a full life is so key, and has been, probably the most eye-opening part of my education here. And that is, just the seeing how you do it, but when things happen to people, whether it was by injury, you named all the ways that you could become part of this community. To be able to tell a parent, or be an example to a parent whose child might be, facing these challenges, is, it's because they grew up not knowing that, right? So
Right.
they're like, oh, it's the end of the world, and they don't know what to tell their children. So for you to be able to, for us to be able to expose this and get this kind of message out to those people is super, super key throughout that kind of community integration piece.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that from you.
I was innocently ignorant myself. I
Right.
still to this day believe that if I didn't become disabled, that community, my community that I live in and love, would still be invisible to me because I had no personal experience.
Yeah. 100%.
Absolutely. And I think for a lot of people, like we've talked a little bit about what people are seeing and how they're coming into this community, and the kind of almost like a culture shock
Yeah.
when they enter. And I'm sure that you experienced as well, but I also know that you're an incredible representation of what's possible in spite of having an injury that could really kind of keep someone in their house, kind of recluse and not wanting to be seen. I think you've really embraced the idea of being seen, and you encourage questions. And I think you, through your lived experience, now have a lot of insight that you're able to share. And I know you and I have worked a little bit on some technology product testing in the past. So if you want to share a little bit about that, and how, being involved with that project was able to ensure that we have an inclusive space, and the technology that was being developed and processed and tested was really being made for people, to be able to go out and work in society, to live in society, and kind of explain a little bit of the benefit for those people, both with disabilities and as a society as a whole.
So I like to call myself a crash dummy. I have to figure out a better way to say that. But I am a product testing engineer. But I am so open to all of it. As I mentioned, there's all this great athletic stuff that I could do, which just really moves me literally and figuratively, because people with disabilities need to get out of their head, get out of bed, and get into the world. I will tell you that a large part of the disability community will not leave a trusted environment where they can access it, because they know as soon as they open their front door, they're rolling into an inaccessible world. So I would say, in particular, I think the technology you're talking about is the IBOT wheelchair. So there's seat elevation. This is a wheelchair. Okay. You talked about, seat elevation, my being able to look at you in your eyes. Well, in addition to that, right, I've worked with a lot of technology that have seat elevation as an option, but this particular Segway-like wheelchair has seat elevation. So it goes from the regular 3 feet level up about 12 to 18 inches, where I can look at your beautiful eyes, Amara, but it also climbs stairs, curb cuts. I recently, had beach access, I'm not going to mention where I went, but this beach did not have wheelchair access. It didn't have like the big bubble wheel devices that you can rent and get to the water. Fortunately, I had the iBot wheelchair made by Mobius Mobility, and I was able to get to the beach at the water line. It takes, I think I can go into 6 to 8 inches. I'm able to navigate trails. So it goes into like a 4-wheel mode. So I was able to, for the first time, get into nature since my injury, because a standard wheelchair would not be able to access a nature trail, if you will. And this opens up my world, opens up opportunities for me to hang out with my kids, but it's also driven my advocacy for inclusive innovation. And even in all the great things that are happening with this particular device, I'm able to now give feedback, right? Someone who's living in that chair, living in this world, and be able to speak to the manufacturers and say, 90% of it's great, let's work on the other 10% together for other people with disabilities. So, and, I'm very approachable in this robot. People love to ask me questions, none of which I reject, because it's all very valid. So no, I'm pretty excited about my new toy, even though I'm testing it. It's my toy.
Absolutely.
I love the videos. Like I said, at the beginning, I watching your TikToks and your videos, and just a smile on your face as you zoom across the beach. What some folks don't know, I traveled with you in the air, and I think I need to get on a skateboard or some roller skates or something and just connect behind you, because Yvette moves. So I got a great workout trying to keep up with you traveling around. But yeah, no, it's really cool. And just and your push towards not only you being able and having access to the iBot and this technology, but making the awareness so broad that more people can get at. Because could you imagine if everybody who needed it could have that? The quality of life, just the quality of life would be so amazing for folks. So I know that's a big push for you too, and some of the work that you're doing there.
Absolutely. 100% of what I do is not just opening doors, but taking them off hinges. I'm a tester, right? And I like to test a society and a community that was built backwards. And as far back as we need to go to make it accessible, not just to people who are disabled today, but those who have and I hope they never will. But again, even as aging, our bodies need a little help. My glasses are an accommodation, right? So any accommodation that I can make for others is part of what I've learned from Judy Heumann. Had she not done what she did with the ADA, I would not have a foundation to stand on. So her work needs to be continued through everyone who uses the opportunities that she's created in her own personal life. That's our responsibility, right? And that's how we repay the world that we live in, by making sure it continues to grow and to keep it safe for the next generation.
Absolutely. That's incredible. And I know we're coming up on time, and I don't want to rush the incredible conversation that we have. I would be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about empowered innovation and what that means to you as we're living in this kind of technological world. We've made the shift towards AI. If the audience doesn't know, you have a book coming out, and it's titled Inclusive Innovation, Harnessing AI, Robotics, and Machine Learning for Disability Tech. So I would love if you could share a little bit about the inspiration for your upcoming book and some things that people can expect from it.
Absolutely. So in a nutshell, it highlights the intersection of AI, robotics, and disability, but it also emphasizes my personal perspective and expertise as a disabled engineer. So AI is amazing, but much like other areas, including medicine, we need to make sure that all people are included in the way that it's developed. It may be too late or taking a longer time to circle back and clean up things that weren't already in place for people with disabilities, but AI is new and fresh enough that our perspective is included in the way that it's developed, right? So our intersectionality influences experiences with people with disabilities. So if we can shape our experiences first, right? We don't have to worry about compounding discrimination based on those factors, right? So we need to prioritize inclusive policies. Something like AI is huge. It's raw and it's growing leaps and bounds. And 90% of the reason is because people with disabilities needed more help doing the things that were more difficult for us. So fair access to resources and opportunities is so important. And in this book, I will break down from the point of just understanding what disability is, why it's important, and a lot of what we discussed today, but then digging deep enough into AI and technology to educate those who are reading it, and hopefully government and policymakers that are implementing it, and all the way down to end users, kids that are using it, and words that are being used within, the prompt engineers, as I call Akil sometimes, how we ask those questions, right? Enhancing the usability and inclusivity, across the diverse needs. So it's not just people with disabilities, right? It's everyone's needs, right? User experiences, I don't know how much that's been tested, but promoting more equitable and socially responsible society overall. So I'm excited about the book. I'm excited that you brought it up.
I am too. I can't wait.
Yeah. I can't either.
I am too, and thank you so much for that. Amara did mention we are coming to the end, but I do want to. Someone asked you to share the ISBN for the book, or if we could post a link for the book. So Amara, if you could post a link for the book, we want to make sure we get that out there. As we close, I want to get back into some of the fun stuff. I am always amazed. If you've looked at Yvette's pages and her social media, you'll see her scuba diving, you'll see her rock climbing, you'll see her golfing, you'll see her doing. So let's talk just real quick before we close. Tell some of the adaptive sports stuff, and are there any new adaptive sports with new technology that you are looking to? You got some bucket list sports that you haven't done yet that maybe with some technology in the iBot possibly we can do?
Yes, definitely. So you mentioned so many of their water skiing, snow skiing, scuba diving. I've done a couple para triathlons, right? In the spirit of the Olympics and Paralympics this year. I've probably done most of them. 21, I think, is my latest number. I think surfboarding is one people don't expect. Soccer is a really good one, basketball. So I think my relationship with NASCAR, is something that's on my bucket list, to create race cars for people with disabilities. Another one is piloting. I have been on the passenger side, so I've co-piloted, but there are programs where the cockpit is built specifically for a wheelchair. And so learning how to fly a plane instead of jumping out of one is a really big one. But, I've said this before, adaptive sports and activity is a form of activism. I think because I've been crazy enough to do some of these sports with supervision and support, other people have been able to try it, and not just people in wheelchairs. So physical activity is so important for our well-being, and it's promoting physical health, mental wellness, and social inclusion. So I get to do, like, my kids are now certified divers, so we can dive together. So it plays a really vital role in enhancing our quality of life and fostering independence.
And that and creating longevity in life, right? Because the happier you are, the more you want to live and have a desire to get out there. That improvement in the quality of life usually transfers into longevity. And so I think that's you're helping people live longer. When you talk about the pilot thing, it made me think about our friend Jessica, and the fact that, she is the no-arm pilot and a black belt in Taekwondo at the same time. So, the community is huge, and there are some really strong advocates for the changes that need to be done. Before we get out of here, and we're going to go ahead and get to our close, any last things that you want to say, that message-wise, or that you love for people to know? I know you spoke about the book. We'll make sure we get that back out there. We talked about the scholarships. make sure people are not only applying for, but also supporting and helping to fund, because those are huge.
Yes.
But any other kind of last messages you wanna give to the folks before we close up?
Absolutely. Like the future of accessibility and the accessibility movement. Like I honestly, in the next 10 years would like to work myself out of a job. I don't think people with disabilities have to work so hard to be included, right? So a future with inclusivity is something that I believe will be ingrained in every aspect of society in the next generation. And I hope that we can look back and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe that those doors were ever even closed, right? So full participation for people with disabilities, of course, technological advancement like AI-driven accessibility tools. I talked about wearable technology for real-time assistance, sensory devices that cater to our diverse needs, virtual reality, using those differently for training and digital interfaces, just anything really to empower independence and inclusion for people with disabilities. I keep bringing that up, not because we're extra special, we are extra awesome, but I really believe that if you can create something for a community of people with disabilities, then anybody can use it, right? So if you know, when you think of biblically, the least of these can access, equipment and buildings and work and school, we're promoting awareness and advocacy for inclusive policies and designing accessible environments, fostering partnerships, not just in policy, but for allies, like people on this line who are listening live, those who will listen, on the replay. Let's just embrace diversity, right? And prioritizing accessibility and innovation and just amplifying the voices of marginalized groups, right? It's an essential step towards creating more inclusive and an accessible world for all.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you so much for today. Thank you, Amara, for being such a wonderful co-host, and everybody that joined, Mr. Nixon, for your questions, other folks that had things to say in the chat. This is huge, and we are going to continue doing this. We're going to continue to blast the awareness on every channel that's available. Yvette mentioning Inaccessible World, keep that in the back of your mind. That's going to be something that's going to be coming your way. But there's amazing work being done and more work to be done. And the more allies, the better. The more people that are interested in helping to fund these efforts is hugely important from every level. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you, BDPA and Devin, for having us. Make sure that you guys sign up for the BDPA conference and come and join us. Vanguard will be there for sure, and looking forward to seeing you all there. So have a great day and take care.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, BDPA and Vanguard.
Bye.
Right on.
Bye, everyone.
All right. Thank you all. Blessings to you now.
Thank you. Thank you.